play, because otherwise, you know, you run into with the budget problems, either eliminate it totally, or, you know, offer, and they can do fundraising, they can do whatever, like, say, a club sport. They do fundraising for the club sport. What's the difference if it's a school-sponsored sport? That's what I'm asking, is if it's allowed, because otherwise you're looking at possibly eliminating teams totally.
Right.
Say cheerleading, say modified football, because we all know it's very expensive, and, you know, we have to pay coaches a lot of money and pay, you know, so if you eliminated modified football, which would get a lot of people up in arms.
Well, I think when you look at athletics, you know, and all of the reductions here are not gonna be popular reductions. I think, you know, part of what we have to do is have a sound rationale for what we're eliminating and, you know, give the reasons for that. We will look into the pay-to-play piece, we'll get some opinions on that to see where we have to go with that.
This kind of came up in the Erie County School Board delegate
Okay?
meeting, and some of the other districts were, they were making students pay for uniforms. One had cut out JV cheerleaders. The district only paid for conference games. And if the teams wanted to play non-conference games, they had to come from booster money one way or another. So those are just some of the things that some of the other school districts were saying, either they're looking at, or most of them have already, those type of things that are already done. Most of the smaller districts.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea, like
we'll-
not paying for transportation to the, you know, games that you play against Holy Angels per se.
Well, actually, it was funny, what they found when they said that they had to pay for the non-conference games, it was cheaper to bus them to another school, because it's more expensive to have another team come to your school, have the school open, the staff it, and have the referees.
All away games?
So they were,
The
Oh.
whole season?
they were just doing the non-conference games, so if
Yeah.
you wanna play out.
I hear you, yeah.
But yeah,
That's a
they had all the non-conference games were away because it was cheaper just to pay for the busing to the other schools.
But the pay-to-play comes back to the whole issue of field trips. Is it fair for families who can pay to have these activities available, and the families who can't pay to not have these activities available?
But I'm not saying an enormous amount of money, and I'm saying, you know, already, these kids are buying their extra uniforms, which I'm sure
Right,
everybody
already
here
our
has
kids buy uniforms.
You know, it's already
currently, so-
$50-some you have to pay anyway for whatever, you know, Cassie played softball last year, they gotta buy the jacket and the this and the that, and, you know.
And part of what I would like you to keep in mind as we look at all of these reductions, keep in mind that the big picture is a $33 million gap. And so, you know, you're going to hear sometimes, well, you know, if you're proposing to eliminate, you know, like last year, we did modified cheerleading, we proposed to eliminate that. And that's a $2,500 program. Why, you know, come on, in a $56 million, you can come up with $2,500.
And the kids have a gap of a year and a half where they have nothing, this is their only chance.
Right, but the difficulty is when you focus on the money, we are getting to a lot of $2,500. And so when you have $50, $2,500 items on the table, that amounts to a significant amount of money. But that's where our budget is taking us at this point.
It's only years
So,
doing this.
right, and that's, we
Well, it's nice.
don't have that, so.
Because it's, I mean, as you go through this is uniquely fair. You know, and I think that was one of the problems that keeps coming up is,
Mhm.
you know, people always say, well, there's no cut in administration, there's only cuts in teachers, and there's no cut in the arts, there's only cut in the sports, and, you know, the nice
Or
thing about
whatever,
this is it
yeah,
really is
and
cutting
that's-
everything.
It's gonna be that, I mean, no
very
matter what you
equally.
do, it's that way, but I'm just offering an
Yeah.
alternative.
Well,
I
with
mean,
that said, we do have a district facilities committee, and the pay-to-play has been brought up about
Oh,
4
I'm sure
years.
it's been brought
Every
up
year for about 4 years.
20 million times.
And it has been discussed, and it's always looked into, and for whatever reason, there is legalities, whatever. But now I think we're at the point that
We have no
it's
choice.
been discussed for 4 years.
But can somebody say, I wanna take science, you're gonna cut that, you're gonna take that one class or cut that one program, I wanna pay to learn. I mean, how far are we gonna take this?
So that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So it's
So,
been thrown around and
you're gonna let
discussed,
those-
pay-to-play
You're gonna let the
often.
wrestling
Science
guys
is
pay to wrestle, I'm
mandatory.
gonna pay to take AP chemistry that you just taught.
I think they do pay for the AP class, don't they?
Just
Or
the
no,
test.
just the
It's
To
exam.
pay for the exam.
But as you said, everything's, let's pick on kindergarten again, it would used to be like, well, this school has 14 kids, this class has 19. Now they're all 21, 20, it's down to the bare bones of everything right now. And if it's gonna keep going, what's gonna get gone next year and the year after, and how much more can you take away before you cut football, before you cut basketball, you know, all of it? Or you cut field trips, or you cut, you know, we go to 28 kids in a class, we go to 20, you know, whatever, you know.
So let us take you through some of the other portions of the budget. Barb has a lot of focus on transportation, but first slide is, you know, just kind of summarizing that budget gap, Barb, so I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, well, basically where we are right now, as superintendent has led us to, is we are looking at our rollover budget number. We've subtracted off our additional state aid and our potential reductions based on the staffing and the athletics piece to have us look at a budget gap somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.572. So, still have a real long way to go, but it's starting to come together. I mean, you're starting to see the formulation is starting to bring together a shell so that we can see where we are and where we need to go. We're hoping to get more and more information in the next couple of weeks, and so that on the 14th we should be able to provide really a lot more concise information for you folks, especially regarding the cap piece. I wanted to take a little bit of time, and I've got a lot of slides, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Some of you have seen a similar presentation perhaps in the past. We wanted to take a quick look at transportation. It's a big part of our budget, and at least have everybody understand how it works and what we do have going on with transportation. We have two major providers, Fisher Bus and Hamburg School Car, that we have contracts with. We've had contracts with them back to the 70s. So what we've really been doing is extending the contracts, which we are allowed to do by law. Our most recent agreement, it was a 3-year extension. That takes us through 12/13. The way the contracts read is the cost increases are limited to CPI, but cannot exceed 3%. So this is just a little history. You can see in 9-10 there was a 0 increase, 10-11 2.2, and 11-12 was at 2.9. CPI comes out for this intent, for purposes for transportation, it comes out at the end of May. So we really don't know just yet what the CPI increase will be for 12/13, but we're gonna budget for worst case scenario of a 3% increase. Fisher Bus transports 3,286 of our students to our own school buildings, which I just thought was an interesting piece. This has been very educational for me to go through every step of this with the transportation, to really have a really good understanding about who we transport and where they go. So 3,200, almost 3,300 of our own children transported by Fisher Bus to our schools.
Keep in mind, options for Armour are none, you have to transport. Options for Boston Valley, you have to transport. There are limited options for Charlotte because of McKinley. So keep in mind just some of the reasons as to why we're transporting the numbers that we are to a couple of the schools is simply where they're located and what streets they're on, because we can't have walkers.
And the 1,100 for high school, we're not transporting 1,100. We have to be prepared to transport 1,100. You might only have 600 because the other ones are getting rides with their friends or whatever. Is that correct?
Hey, do we know what those numbers are?
These numbers came from Fisher. This is what they're telling you they're transporting.
So this is head count according to the bus drivers.
Yes.
It would be interesting to know that, because I've
It would
always
be
wondered.
very interesting.
Well, I
We-
shouldn't
we
say
brought-
according to the bus drivers, according to Fisher's records. This is the number of kids they're
Because that
transporting.
could be that they're not actually getting the bus because that's the thing we have with.
We need space for that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing with the parking was, you know, we need a parking lot because more kids are driving, the neighbors were getting mad with the streets. But we always said, we have to, unfortunately, do both. We have to prepare to transport this many kids, plus if they wanna drive and do the
They
site.
recently changed that, right, Barb?
They did, now you can budget for ridership.
Correct.
Oh,
You
can
do
you?
not have to have a seat for every child anymore.
Thank
What
God.
you have to do is determine what your ridership is, and that you have to have seating for ridership generally plus maybe 10%.
That's just for the starting this year?
It was, I'm not sure exactly when it went, it was this year, but I'm not sure exactly when it went into effect, when they passed it. So that is new.
Changes.
Yeah. Fisher also transports to our private schools. We have private or non-publics. We have 56 kids right now going to Canisius, Narden, and, oh, my and is in the wrong place, and Buffalo Seminary. That's 56 kids total, that is one run. 197 kids going to St. Peter and Paul and St. Bernadette, for a total of 253 kids. Our other locations that we have contracts for Fisher Bus with, Powder Road, they shuttle to the vocational center. This vocational center is the one that is on Southwestern, 159 pre-K kids, and then of course, we don't have an exact count of the number of kids for athletic and or late runs, but those are based on per run, not on per kid. So for the numbers that we do know, they're transporting about 234. Hamburg School Card, their contracts are a little different. They do a lot of our out-of-district and or special ed runs. 38 kids going out of district special education placements, which is to 23 sites, 59 in-district special education students to 6 buildings, 84 out-of-district non-public schools to 12 sites, and 48 BOCES non-special education placements to 6 sites. We transport to a lot of different places. It's very interesting to see where we go.
Like disproportionately compared to other districts, or?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that it's just, I think due to our geographic location, we fall within the radius of going to many different institutions, and I wouldn't say we're greater than other districts that are set up like us, but it was just interesting, especially, coming from a smaller school district
Right.
like North Collins.
It's too far.
Yeah, there's not a lot of places North Collins transported to because they just didn't have to get to there. So it's interesting.
Like the out-of-district, non-public schools and BOCES non-special education, where those, out of curiosity, I guess, where those going? 'Cause those are non-special ed,
St. Mary's,
right? Is that?
if we had that,
BOCES.
would do that.
Yeah, all the different BOCES locations.
BOCES, you may go to we go to Harkness,
Yeah,
we go to Dexter Terrace.
BOCES, yeah.
Carrier.
St. Mary's is BOCES.
For whatever the various programs at those
Yeah.
particular
Correct.
locations.
And one of the things that we do have to worry about coming up from a BOCES perspective is if districts now start pulling out of BOCES programs, and BOCES is limited to what they offer, we may find it's not offered locally. So we may be traveling a greater distance to give our kids the same program.
And when that happens, do some schools opt out of offering that program anymore?
They may, part of what will happen is if from a BOCES perspective, they need participation. So if you have districts pulling out of their programs and not sending students to their programs, the tuition costs will go up for those that do send kids. So it's, part of that is, looking at what those factors are going to be. We don't, BOCES information is due April 1, I believe, the final,
Yeah, we're just starting to work on the
final
BOCES
numbers. We're
budget.
working on that now, so,
And our numbers in BOCES has gone up and up and up over the last bunch of years, has it not?
I think it's, yeah, I'd have to look at that in particular. I do believe it's gone up, particularly some of the voc tech stuff that we participate in.
But we also then don't have to provide teachers in the building to come,
Right.
I mean,
I think
either way.
BOCES is a very, very good, wise expenditure of money. They have excellent programs, they provide our kids opportunities, and it would be less expensive than we could provide it for. Plus, they have the program, they have the knowledge, the curriculum to do it. So it's, they offer very good programs, and,
They do.
we want to keep our participation in those programs.
My next slide shows you a little bit of cost that we have historically in Fisher Bus. The contracts are all broken out into different manners. And so this one basically is our to and from. This current fiscal year, 11-12, that's a budgeted number. The preceding years are actual. So this year we're budgeting $1,874,000 for this run, which is basically getting the majority of our kids just to and from school. all I've done for 12-13 is take the budgeted number and apply the 3% maximum increase, and that's what we'll be looking at for a potential 12-13 number. Right now, we're really not certain if our number of buses is going to change, and if that is in fact the case, then it would affect the cost. But right now, we're budgeting conservatively, assuming that there would not be a reduction in buses, nor would there be anything less than the 3% increase. Our pre-K contract, 3 years of historical numbers, this year's budget is at 90,000. Applying what we believe the increase to be, we're looking at projecting in the neighborhood of 92.7 in pre-K costs next year to transport the kids. Total of all Fisher contracts, like I said, the historical 3 years of those are actual costs. We've got budgeted $2.271 million in this year's budget for Fisher, and we're projecting $2.339886 for 12-13. Transportation is a big chunk of our budget, and this is one contract.
But it's also been going down, if you look, I mean, you're projected, but it had gone down, even with the
Yes,
rising
because we
fuel
used to have more
costs.
runs.
Yeah, I mean, because you look at the numbers in 8, 9, 9, 10, 10, 11, it went down.
Yeah.
And we don't know this year yet. Correct?
Correct, yeah. I was looking, I mean, historically, we had more bus runs, so the costs are higher. Now, I can't tell you why. I know there was some realignment, obviously that predates me, but I know there was a lot of, look at efficiencies. Not that necessarily, I mean, we are a difficult district to have what would be considered efficient bus runs in. Because as the superintendent said about the way our schools are situated in the streets, we don't really have very many walkers, and we don't have the ability to have walkers. So it's difficult to run it from what would be considered.
And what's the issue with walkers? They have, a size of the traffic pattern of the street is too large?
Well, when you look at
to
our, it's
navigate?
just, there's no sidewalks. And we don't have sidewalks on that road here.
Okay.
It's not within a mile, most of the houses are further than a mile away, isn't there a mile?
Same Boston Valley.
Yeah,
Here's my, it's the middle school, my kids get a bus. I live farther away growing up and I walk. I mean, I still don't get that. Granted, I love my kids walking in the block, getting on the bus in this kind of weather, but, you know, we walk 3 blocks farther away.
You
than we do
drive
now.
them, don't you?
No, I don't. I sleep in on the days I'm off.
So is that mandated?
That's
A
why I never,
certain distance?
It's a
Sorry.
certain distance.
Well, certain
Mile?
distances are, I'd have
Well,
to
it's-
take a look and see
think
if
it's a
our
mile.
policy is
I think it's a
anything different.
Would it be more of a district decision? I mean, Kenmore they just expanded their element,
it used to be,
Middle
it used to
and
be
higher
East Main
elementary.
Street,
you
Newton
have to
Road.
vote on it, so they've agreed to put
Okay.
that up as a proposition.
Okay.
And I believe that proposition is gonna come forward to them prior to their budget, so that they will know what they can budget, rather than having being voted on budget day.
okay.
So,
Explain this, or correct me, interrupt me if I get this wrong, because I know I'm gonna get this wrong, because it confuses me. The pre-K runs are full-size buses. Fisher doesn't have the short buses because we pay the same no matter what?
mhm.
If they had short buses or mini buses. And when that large bus comes, at my daughter's, there's 10 students on it. And we pay the same amount if it was 10 students or if it was a shorter bus. You would think if
It would-
Fisher, if we told Fisher buy small buses, we'd save money, we don't.
Well, the issue is they have a fleet,
Yeah.
and they'll utilize that fleet because they need those buses
for other
filled
things.
in other, you know, for other students,
And
in
those
other
buses,
runs.
yeah, being used all, the pre-K bus drops them off, and they go do something else with it.
Mhm.
So you think like, geez, why couldn't we get a couple of mini buses and save on, or pick up more pre-K kids, but it just doesn't work out that way, and that's why you have $80,000-$90,000.
I'd really like to understand what it's costing on a per rider basis. I mean, this is a big number of our budget,
Mhm.
so, I mean, should we, and I know Fisher's been very good to the district in many ways, and very supportive of helping us with our budget, and I think you had said, Barb, that the contract was a pretty good contract, and we
Yeah.
we don't want to really,
Well, we put out an RFP last time, and I think we got one company back, and that was Fisher. Nobody else bid on it.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, even if you wanted to put out an RFP, I mean, there are only certain bus companies in this area. Pretty much everybody who has contracted transportation, it's already predetermined and sort of divvied up. You're not going to bring in a new company that's gonna be overly competitive and beat out the other folks. So, and there's, you know, long-term relationships that have been established, and the pricing that we actually have with them is very good. That's not to say that we can't manage it, make sure that as our population shifts and things change and other things grow, that you can't, we need to make sure that we are still doing it the best way that we can, but I would tend to say that we are getting our money's worth with our contracts.
Well, and we are getting aid on the transportation.
We are getting aid on
You
it.
gotta realize that too, we get a nice chunk of change for aid, pre-K and transportation.
Plus Fisher can get the gas on state bid through us, so
Yes.
that reduces our cost. Instead of us paying what Joe Blow pays the pump.
Yeah,
So
we
the
buy our
contract-
gas on state.
Yeah, we
bids.
buy our gas on state bid.
But we still can always look and say,
And
is
we
there a
can-
route we can cut?
Yeah,
Are
that's,
there
Oh,
that's,
lines
that's
that
what I,
we-
that's what I think
As
is good,
things
put
change,
the right
Just,
thing, and if
just
one
like
bus-
each year, we've cut a $50,000 bus run out.
But do you add,
We've been chipping away at it.
do you add 20 minutes to a 4-year-old in pre-K to the ride to Charlotte Avenue, when you're saving $2,000, is it worth it? You know, but it would be, to me, more worth it for my kids to say, guess what? It's going to vote, you're now at 1.1 miles, we're extending that to 1.5 miles, guess what? Get some good shoes, you're walking. You know, there's some things we can probably look at, that we have to put up the vote to maybe save.
Some good healthy alternatives.
Like the athletic budget, saving $45,000 is not a lot, but it's a start, it's the $2,500 we're at.
Divided by the amount of students
So
that
maybe
they
expanding that, looking into that, and expanding that walking distance a little farther. We've got some great roundabouts, cars are stopping.
Mhm.
That's not that bad.
Well, we'll take a look at, you know, we'll work that through with Fisher and take a look at all
Plus
the
it's
miles
needed,
and this and
so-
see.
Does,
And
does
what's the-
Fisher, do they plan the routes and
Yeah.
the drivers and all that? It's the only reason, like, when I was leaving today, there was 2 buses coming out of one of the subdivisions in Boston. And I didn't have time to go back there just to, you know,
No, I mean,
it's
I don't-
one of the streets
I think it's
I
in
never,
the
I don't go down.
Mhm.
So I don't know how many houses are back there, but I was kinda surprised to see two buses pulling, nose to tail pulling out
One
of
could be a
it.
But
Boston
about the
Valley,
same time,
one
might have
could
been
be
high
a-
school, might have been high school and middle school.
It could have been.
Yeah, or
And I'm not tooting Fisher, because, you know, we don't get any from them, but when we have a problem with Fisher Bus, it's, you know, I call up there, hey, I got a parent complaining about the kids on the bus, the next day, they're all seated
No,
service.
you know, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I had an issue with the bus, and before I was on the board, Keith Fisher himself called me, because it was a pretty serious manner, and, you know, and he hunted me down, like, he called my husband's office to find out. I simply called and spoke to the lady that answered the phone and told her about an issue that had occurred, and, you know, Keith Fisher himself called me. You know, and it was dealt with, and it was dealt with that same day, and there was never an
And
issue after.
a lot of districts would love to privatize their buses and not have it part of their district, because of the expense of that.
You know,
because you
and
get a
not to
great deal.
mention, we don't have the liability, do we? I mean, isn't the liability on Fisher Bus?
Well,
They,
You always have liability, I mean.
right,
it's-
but they
You're always
have
gonna
a
sue us.
majority, well, everybody can
know
see,
that.
we know
I
if
just,
there's
I
anybody.
just enjoy
having-
not having a fleet of buses, not having a bus garage, not having bus
And to deal with
drivers,
the
and
employees.
another unit
Maintenance.
to deal, I mean, it really is, and I think, you know, the contracted transportation allows us options as well, and part of what we will be reviewing over the next couple of years is how we can cooperate with other districts, say Frontier or Orchard Park, that are going through the same program, and instead of having each district transporting kids, are there efficiencies that can be had if we do some more cooperative looks at transportation? So those issues are underway as well. We will be studying those, we'll be trying to figure out where, again, we can have more efficiencies, and, you know, transportation is one of those areas that you have to be extremely careful in terms of the length of time kids are on buses, but we also want to be more efficient in how we transport kids too.
Plus, it's nice because then we don't have to
What
worry
is it?
about taking work away from the union people.
Yep.
Other districts will have issues with doing that because when they have their own bus drivers, now you wanna take and give that work to an outside contractor. You know, they're gonna have some issues. We're not gonna have those problems, so we're really in a better position. All in all, Hamburg school car, here's their totals for the past 3 years, and this year's current budget, we have a 1.374 budgeted, and we're projecting $1,423,770 for 12-13. Like I said, it could be less than this, it really depends what CPI comes in at. The issue is that CPI is available for transportation at the end of May. So if you all think about it, that's a little out of fact, it's the way they do it. It's a certain specific CPI that's provided to us at the end of May, so.
This is our expensive one, it appears. Hamburg school car, I mean, that's quite expensive for the amount of students that they transport as opposed to Fisher. It doesn't seem proportionate.
Less
because-
students, but more individualized runs,
Right, I mean, they go to a lot more
Specialized.
places, yeah,
And further,
or specialized.
Further away.
right. Yeah, a lot of Fishers actually within district. Hamburg School Card does a lot of our out of
Further.
district, yeah.
They would do a St. Mary's run or
Yes.
something, we might have 2 students going to St. Mary's, School for the Deaf.
Our fuel costs, fuel is provided, for our contract with Fisher Bus, and as we've already discussed, the fuel is purchased off state contract. There is no fuel provided, to Hamburg School Car based on the contract we have with them. You'll see our historic, fuel costs, what we've got budgeted this year and what we're projecting for next year. Oops, let me go real quick. This is a little hard to read, but this is also, in your,
this is Barb's attempt to keep our numbers small.
yeah. I wanted to put it all together, so. Yeah, if you really like this slide, I can get you a bigger one. But I wanted to put together our historic transportation costs, and this goes all the way back to 05-06. And it's kind of interesting just to see how, the percentages, of course, are skewed when you start to look at historical data over an 8-year period. But I just think it's interesting. And so basically, it's a summary of what you saw in the preceding slides. Now I'm gonna change gears with you here just for a minute. I know the superintendent sent you this in your board information last week, but I did wanna share the state aid analysis that came out, and I'm going to pass this along to you folks. If you want to take a copy, you can keep it in your binder. This is the actual state aid run that was provided to us, and, oops, I put this down, I know, it went crazy, there we go. You can see that the number that the superintendent was using, the $476,317, is our net aid increase. You can see where those changes occurred from 11-12 to 12-13, the dollar change. Really, what's interesting is that our aid really didn't increase that much. Our gap elimination adjustment decreased, so it kind of makes it seem like we're getting more aid, and we are, but we're really getting less taken away, if that makes sense. All of the aid that increased and or decreased are reimbursement aids. Our foundation aid remains flat, that's why there's a 0. It's still the $14,871,961 that it's been for the past several years. Our universal pre-K is always listed as part of the state aid run. It is federal money. It is not counted towards a revenue in the general fund. Why they put it in there, I don't know, but they always have, and they don't seem to think that,
They like to take credit for other people's money.
I don't know, so.
Yeah, that's it, right there.
So that's why I subtracted down at the bottom, so that you can kind of get a little better idea of actually how much money we have to work with. But it's pretty flat. I was very happy to see the gap elimination adjustment was less than the current fiscal year, really. I thought it was going to be higher, so it's a bit of good news overall. Our net increase is $476,000, showing a 2.47% percentage change, which is a little bit misleading. It almost makes you think you're getting that much more aid, but what you're really doing is, like I said, we realized a smaller gap elimination adjustment, so that does benefit us. Wasn't sure if anybody had any questions. You know, you've had this for a few days, I don't know if you've taken a look at it or if you wanted to take a look at it, but
What is the gap elimination adjustment again?
the gap elimination adjustment is the state's whack at trying to close their deficit by saying we're going to give you all of your aid, but there's a calculation based on income in the district, and that's basically your give back to try to reduce the overall state deficit.
So we're wealthy according to them.
With no industry,
Yeah,
so.
but wealthier than we actually are. Also.
But we're below the state wealth average when you,
Yes,
for
we
how
are.
for how they look at wealth.
Yes, we are.
And Frontiers, like the percentage of state just came into the governance, Frontier gets a lot more than we do. We kind of compare ourselves to them as kind of being equal, but I guess in their eyes, Frontier's poorer than we are.
Oh, I had all that stuff.
So,
And I took that
so
on my
of
phone. It
the,
was getting too thick.
And then transiency that we don't.
if we had all, if
Transient control of income.
we get state aid for these, we've got the Hamburg school car and the Fisher bus.
And so that's at, our transportation number, there's, am I reading that right, 2.54?
Yes, that's what we have this year. Now, the one thing I do want to remind
So
everybody.
that's the aid we get out of the 3.6 that we spend on transportation. I'm adding Hamburg car plus Fisher bus.
Well, there are other costs in the transportation budget that, you know, there's personnel costs, like some of my salary comes out of there. There are other costs that are actually part of the reimbursement process. It's not just the contracts. There are a certain percentage of all of the transportation costs. And remember, it's on the preceding year, so aid is generated based on what you spent last year.
So this year's.
It's a reimbursement process. So it does, you know, if your costs remain relatively similar, your aid will flow in a relatively similar fashion, so that your reimbursement should say, you know, proportionally similar to your expense.
So if I take the 10, 11 numbers for Hamburg school car and Fisher bus, and divide it by the 11 and 12 aid, that'll give us the ratio of what we get each year
Well,
for
no,
aid?
what you have to do is calculate in all the other expense that's in the transportation budget. So like I said, part of my
Administration costs are
salaries
built
are
into
there.
it, okay.
There's a clerical piece, you know, there are other things that are in there too.
But nothing significant. I mean, it's not significantly higher than what we have here.
Oh, no.
I mean,
but,
you add
know,
in a salary, you know, a
Yeah.
clerical or
Right.
a,
I'm just trying to understand how our aid flows in relationship to how the costs for transportation.
It's not
Now,
that
the cost
simple.
of transportation rising at a faster rate, and is that an area that we really need to, you know, focus in and hone in on as being one of the costs that we should be looking at very closely?
You saying is there a way that we can control that net cost of after the aid and everything, controlling that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the relationship between the aid we get and the costs associated with it. And it's the fact that, is the aid not escalating as quickly as the costs of transportation? You know, your one slide here of.
Is there a way, let's say after all the aid is $1 million, is a way to whittle that down to save money?
Well, the issue is that things are aided differently within the transportation budget. And part of the process is your allowable pupil. You can't just take what we expended divided by what we get from the preceding year and derive a percentage. I mean, you could, but it's really not a proper reflection, because the way that you're aided is different depending upon what the expense is on different lines. And there's certain rules that you have to follow. Your aid can be different for certain runs of your buses based on if you have enough aidable pupil, there's an aidable pupil decimal. It's, actually, I have, you know, if you wanna, I can give you information so you can read about it.
Isn't this the thing where if you?
It's not as exciting as it was a few minutes ago.
Well,
You got my attention.
Okay, so say we cut our
No, and you do have to be
transportation,
careful,
but we're
because if you
gonna
get
lose
down
the
too much,
reimbursement
you're
from
gonna
the
lose
state
that
the
aid.
next year.
Yes.
Well,
And
that's
you don't wanna
this
lose
is-
It's
that
all
aid.
relative,
Just
so
like
that's
everything
not
That's why I
something we need
said,
to.
you gotta be careful with
You have
the
to-
aid, it's pre-K,
You're being
it's
for 85%.
transportation.
If we try to will our net, whatever's left over, then our aid is gonna be knocked down also.
Right, your age will shrink,
Yeah.
Right.
shrink
Yeah.
also.
That's
I mean,
what
what we
know.
have to do, it's more about making sure we're managing, that we maximize the aid properly on the expense. It's not just about minimizing the expense, because minimizing the expense also minimizes your reimbursement aid. So, but you have to make sure you're maximizing the aid to the fullest allowable amount. That is really how you make sure you get as much aid as you can to offset your cost.
Mhm.
And so which dollars are those? Is it, in the transportation world?
It's the ridership, you have to make sure that you're maximizing the aid properly on your runs, that it's being reported properly, that you get the right mix of students on the run, so that you always have students that are aidable on a run, that you don't have a non-aidable bus run. You have to have certain kinds of kids, they have to be a certain distance.
Is pre-K in there, or is pre-K separate, because pre-K is funded through a separate federal? So that transportation,
That's.
that comes out of that $500,000 rate, not,
What was your question, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Or what?
if the pre-K transportation is part of this whole transportation computation, or if pre-K is out of the $500,000 separate pre-K federal money?
Right, pre-K is separate, they're totally separate pre-K for everything.
Is pre-K, is that a fixed amount, or is that based on pupils, or how do they come up with that number?
Well, it's based on, actually, we just received some information, and we have to go back and check it, because now they're trying to base it based on what our beds enrollment was, it's a little different. So, but usually, it's based on actual enrollment after the fact,
That's why we wanna keep our enrollment where it's at.
yes.
Because we wanna get the aid.
Right.
I think we're at what, 160, or that's where we want to cushion it?
59 and 163 are the numbers
Yeah.
that,
That we need to really hold at to
Yeah.
get the aid.
And we're at 159.
Well, and that transportation cost really seems, I mean, when you think about it, and the amount of students that they transport and relative, I mean, what was it, 80,000 for all of pre-K? And that's back, forth, morning, afternoon,
There's two classes.
Well,
two
there's-
classes every
yeah.
day. I
Except
mean,
Monday
that's,
Monday
through
through
Thursday.
Thursday.
Monday through
Thursday.
Thursday.
And you're getting money, you gotta realize, for the buses.
right, that's what I'm saying, so it
You've
really
got to
isn't
realize,
costing us
right, so
that
when people say cut the buses
Oh.
for
And-
pre-K,
and well, this also is
you've
pre-K.
gotta really understand the whole
Once
concept
you cut
behind
them, you're
it.
No
never
matter what
gonna get
anybody
it back
says, the
either.
kids that don't go to pre-K, the kids that do go to pre-K, there's a big learning difference there. And so you want pre-K because later on, the cost of us catching these kids up is, you know, not reimbursable. We're paying for that. So having pre-K helps the kids along the whole process, protect their both grades.
And also on Fridays, the parents have to drive the children to
Oh,
pre-K.
no, my kids went, I know,
And
yeah.
And
But
it's a
before, my older
significant
kids
drop
couldn't
off.
go, and then they opened, which I think they opened that up to everyone in the district.
Does
Yeah.
Fisher do all the divvying
used
up
to be.
of runs and making sure the right number of aidable people are on each of the buses? I mean, is that part of what Fisher has to do in terms of their process too?
That is part of what they do, yeah, and then we take a look at what they're doing and make sure they're doing it the way we want them to.
So we're relying on them to do those efficiency calculations to some extent, or
They, you know, they've been doing
determinations.
this for a long time, they know what they're doing, we
Yeah.
look at their work to make sure that our aid will be maximized properly. The whole key with state aid, in all of the different areas, or at least all of the reimbursement aids, is to ensure that you're purchasing what you need to purchase to drive aid, you're purchasing it in a manner that will drive the most aid, and you make sure that you are reporting it properly when you report to the state, you know, in the right manner, in the right line, and that, in the end, you have to follow it to see that throughout the year it's flowing the way it's supposed to be flowing. It's really all about purchasing it in the right way and reporting it in the right way, and staying on top of changes and what drives aid.
Not intuitive parents in the district deciding how their kids should get bused to school. It's really a different methodology.
And it's not necessarily, you know, logical. I
Right.
mean, the way the state reimburses is not necessarily logical or what would seem most effective or efficient, it's the state way.
You can't use New York, you can't use New York State and logical in the same sentence, it just doesn't work.
Some of the things that we do may seem illogical, but they are the right way, the most efficient way, and the way that will drive aid. It's all about driving the aid.
Yeah, I'm learning.
You know, and we're kind of lucky because we're not getting Acme Bus Company, we're getting Keith Fisher from Fisher Bus, who is a alumni, who's on our foundation, who has a vested interest in the district. He's a business, he's out to make money, don't get me wrong, I'm not putting, you know, and Keith and I are just, we know each other from doing this, but, you know, it's like a family almost, where you call up and you say, hey, what's going on with this run? And we're gonna look into that and you know, take care of it. You know.
Yeah, I've been driving my kids to school on days that
Costing us money.
we have.
Well, now we know.
And I see the fuel being burned by me and everybody else, and I'm thinking, this is redundant. There's gotta be a better way. There's got to be a better way to get these kids to school. And we're spending $4 million, 3.7 million bucks.
And you drive your kids, I drive my kids, I
Right.
know, because they'd be on the bus for 45 minutes.
You
Well,
should
it's
see
not
the.
No, that's why I
Well,
drive
it's- It's band or chorus or.
whatever.
You should see the drop off at the
club.
Charlotte Avenue with me, and I do it, I pick them up, it's a walking, I'm 4 blocks away, but hey, I gotta go to Tops, I'm just gonna go pick her up, and we're gonna, you know, go to Tops and come and.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that, because most of those kids walk, and it's
Yeah.
winter, of course the parents are gonna drive.
I'm gonna move us on here, so
Yeah.
Barb, you
Yeah.
can,
Okay,
Thank you.
tax cap update, as the superintendent spoke to earlier. I was actually hoping to give you an update, but we decided against it since it would appear that some additional guidance is expected this week. Actually, I thought it would be at last week. That's regarding the TRS calculation and capital budget exclusions, which we've sort of heard through the grapevine are actually favorable for us. So, at our next meeting on the 14th, I really think we actually will have the number for you folks to take a look at that we'll be submitting. And that really is all I had.
keep in mind too, as we move to the 14th, we have other significant impact items that are coming to the table. One is teachers' retirement incentive. That's a February 1 deadline, so, you know, if we have 15 retirements coming out of that, as the agreement called for, then there is some pretty significant savings. Part of what we have to do there is analyze the impact of the retirement incentive versus reductions in staff and see how those two come together. We have collective bargaining going on with all of our bargaining units, so that's another area of potential savings if we can, you know, potentially get the wage freezes that we're looking to get. All of those pieces combined will now allow us to move forward in a better method if those things start coming together. So, a lot of work still to do, a lot of savings potentially, you know, on the table at this point, and hopefully by the 14th, we'll have some good information for you.
Also on the 14th, I think we'll have on the agenda a refunding resolution. I hoped to have it this evening, even though it wasn't a regular meeting, but didn't quite work out. We plan to price, look, it's gonna be a negotiated deal, and we plan to price sometime towards the end of February with a closing on March 20th. We're pushing it a little early. The earliest so we could close is the 15th because our bond issue is due on June 15th. And so the earliest you go is 90 days. The market's going to be relatively flooded, it would appear. There's going to be a lot of refundings going on. There's 50-some school districts that will be doing it probably in the month of April. So we want to beat them so that we, and hopefully don't have to deal with the market correction. So we're going early. We're going to be ready to go as soon as we're ready by law to do so. And we plan on closing on March 20th. So a refunding resolution will just give us permission to do that.
Well, nice job to you on that then. That's
Well,
great.
we'll see
No,
what
that's,
happens.
that says a lot.
We'll see what happens.
Get
We're
it right
hopeful.
done then.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make my same spiel? I know you can tell me to shut up on this one. Armor has 400, no you can't, I don't know. we're opening up basically 450 students with a secretary down to 1.5. Boston Valley, 1 secretary at 275. Charlotte, and I say this every single year, is, I just lost it, 1.5 at 424, but there's 168 pre-K students. We took pre-K down from a director and a full-time fantastic clerk down to half-time.
Mhm.
And that's a huge, that's a school within itself,
Mhm.
and that person is a lifesaver there.
And what we're looking to do out of
Is that-
Charlotte at this point, the .5 is a .5 clerical in the main office. And if you look on that, that is the only reduction that's occurring in Charlotte.
Okay.
So I think we're being very fair. We're expecting a lot out of all our buildings, and the reduction in clerical staff is difficult, you know, with or without a pre-K
I would say
program.
the 424 with Charlotte's always misleading, because it's actually 150 more, 160 more.
No, that's included in that.
That's including
Yeah,
pre-K?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, and it's always easier to take from the bigger buildings, but they shouldn't always have to.
No, I
Well,
understand.
I think
No,
we're trying to be, you know, again, Charlotte and Boston Valley from a staffing standpoint are difficult because they're small.
And-
I mean, making reductions has a much more significant impact there than it does in a larger school. And, you know, I certainly understand the clerical piece, but we're asking, you know, when you're looking at Armour, that's going from 2.5 to 1.5. So,
Generally with pre-K, it's you're talking brand new families that don't know and have never dealt with the schools.
Mhm.
And that's a huge more of, hey, pick up the phone.
right.
Steve, that little building beside Union Plaza, we sold that?
No.
We own it.
We've,
You own it? What's this?
we've
I
asked-
saw something new about that someplace
Frontier,
recently.
What's happening is that because of the cost of trying to repair that building is pretty significant, it's not aidable. Frontier had some space at their center on Southwestern, and so the teacher center has relocated to that space. That house is still ours, that's a decision we're gonna have to make in the future in terms of what we do with that. It's a pretty significant repair cost.
The support that we give to the teacher center in relationship to the support that Frontier gives to the teacher center, how's that working?
We agreed to pay phone, internet service, came to us in the beginning of the year. I think there was about a cost of, I don't know, $700, somewhere around there. So that was to support their costs. We do have staff development costs, but keep in mind that teacher centers do receive money from the state. That at this point has been cut out of the governor's budget. He did not include teacher center funding. Not exactly sure where the legislature will go for that. I hope there is some restitution of that, because that's a, you know, significant impact when it comes to Common Core standards and staff development for the reform agenda for SED, so.
And that's not a loss to our teachers to have it all the way over there by Frontier? Is it just as worthwhile for our teachers where it is?
I think so, because the classes happen in a variety of places, not only at the center, but classes can happen at other places. I think the travel it's not gonna be huge. They're still gonna have the laminating machines, copy machines there for folks, so.
Difference is there's a parking lot,
There's a parking lot, which is nice.
more room. The family sports center.
Can you make any comment on this remaining budget gap of $1.5 million? And your thoughts in terms of how the other things that we're gonna be talking about in the future will reach toward that?
Well, again, I think we're continuing to analyze all of our costs, all of our expenses. Negotiations with all of our bargaining units is going to be an impact, as well as retirement stuff. So I think, you know, within 2 weeks, we're gonna have a lot more information that can allow us to, you know, move forward with some more recommendations.
That budget gap, is that including, is that a zero tax levy increase? Is that just the rollover with where
Yes,
we're at?
that doesn't include the levy.
Okay, so the levy can be part of what's gonna
Correct,
make that up.
yeah. That's all I have for this evening.
Just want to say no 3-hole punt, but no big deal.
We'll take care of that.
Yeah,
We're gonna get on that. We're gonna get on that.
Can I have a motion for the meeting to be adjourned?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Now you're gonna put a 3-hole punt on the wrong side.
There goes the clerical, the prepaid.
You know, it's counterintuitive